Hello, welcome back to my network. I'm with Ug Jackman, the CEO of Northern Graphite. Ug, thanks for flying in and coming to have a chat.
Oh, you're very welcome. Nice to meet you.
You too. Obviously, we haven't had you on the show before, so just real brief company overview to start with, and then we'll get started.
Sure. Well, I am the CEO of a company called Northern Graphite. We're a Toronto-listed company. We are actually the only producer of natural graphite in North America today. And we have three mines, one in Quebec, Lac des Iles, which has been producing for the last 34 years. We acquired that mine from Iles about a year ago. We have another mine in Namibia. That mine was operating until 2018. Then it was put in care and maintenance by Emirates, who owned it. We also bought that mine about a year ago from Emirates, and we're busy getting it restarted. And then we have the historical asset of Northern Graphite, which is a project in Ontario called Bisset Creek. That project was started in 2002, and most of the work around the PEA feasibility study and so on went on between 2012 and 2018. And the mine is almost permitted and ready to go as a next project.
Good. Okay. Before we get into it all, so just talk me through the capital structure as it stands right now.
Yeah, so we have about 130 million shares outstanding. Our market cap is about 50 million today. Shares were trading about 39 and a half, 40 cents. We don't really have any shareholder that have more than 5% of the company. Actually, the largest shareholder today is Iles, who sold us the mine. So we have quite a broad base of investors in the company today. In terms of company structure, we are producing, so we are generating revenue every month. We have quite a lot of working capital because we do have product in inventory within the company itself. We have more than $12 million of inventory at the moment. We are really working hard to move the company from being just a graphite miner, but also moving it downstream to be able to make a battery anode material and to also produce foils and applications such as fuel cells and graphene-like type materials.
Yeah, so to unlock a bit more value. You've mentioned obviously Emirates there, which is your largest shareholder, but it's not just your largest shareholder, it's also your former employer. Maybe give us a little bit on your background and how you transitioned from Emirates to Northern Graphite and what the opportunity you
Sure,
saw
sure.
was.
Well, I joined Iles about 10 years ago. I was hired by them to basically create the graphite and carbon division. And what we did is that we combined the natural graphite asset, the synthetic graphite asset, and the carbon black asset in order to be able to develop the company into the lithium-ion battery space. And during my time there, I basically built up the company by investing in the existing asset to create more capacity, but as well as buying technology that would enable Imerys to participate not only in the conductive additive side of the lithium-ion battery, but also on the active material side. And so we acquired some technology in Palo Alto, which we scaled in Lugano in Switzerland. We acquired a company in Japan that was coating spherical shaped natural graphite in Japan. We also developed the mine in Namibia, which we started in 2017. It was really the first new greenfield graphite project that had been developed at the time. So yes, spent quite a bit of time with Imerys. I've been in the graphite industry for about 10 years now. And it's fascinating to see what's been happening. When I started back in 2012, 2013, the entire lithium-ion battery capacity on the global level was 2 gigawatt.
Yeah.
And today we're talking about 1 terawatt, right? So multiple orders of magnitude of growth have happened since then.
With Emirates, tell me a little bit more about them in a sense, because obviously two of your core assets, the Quebec assets and the Namibia assets, have both come from Emirates. Are they still in the graphite space, or what was the opportunity for you and them to take these into Northern Graphite? What was the idea behind that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It was back in 2020 in the middle of COVID. Greg, who was the CEO of Northern Graphite at the time, he was looking to add to his asset base in order to come out of a COVID situation stronger than anyone into it. And at the time, I reached out for Imeris and basically spoke with the CEO who just had been named and asked him if he would be willing to sell these assets to us and whether natural graphite was strategic for them. And he agreed to sell the asset to us. And their focus was really more on the conductive additive side, so on the synthetic graphite and the carbon black. And so we bought these two mines from them and integrated them into Northern Graphite. I think, Emirates' strength around the graphite and carbon business was really more on the synthetic and the carbon black side of the business on as a conductive additive. In order to build up the natural graphite into anode material, there's quite some significant investment to be made downstream, which is what we're busy trying to do at the moment.
Good. There's loads to go through here because you've got the three core assets, and then you've got the BAM facility or the BAM facility, and then there's also the other partner that you have. So I guess we need to do it in an order in a sense, but they're starting Quebec. You're currently the only graphite mine in production at the moment in North
Correct.
America. Talk us through production volumes, talk us through the strategy here, because you've also acquired some more assets around 80 kilometers away. And I was reading that the strategy is to obviously use the existing processing plant. And what I was trying to get, is it trucked? Is it railed? How are you envisioning Quebec at the moment in terms of processing capacity and where it goes in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. The mine we have in Lac des Îles was started 35 years ago almost, and it has mined a number of different pits, and actually a lot of the mine has already been remediated over the years. And today, it's a great little facility because it has the ability to process some significant amount of graphite. It's fully permitted. It has a fully permitted tailing dam which has a lot more life into it. And Imeris really didn't do much exploration around the mine because they didn't need to. There was the pits that existed that had plenty of graphite into it. Now, we're starting to run out of that material in that specific pit. So, the first thing we did, before we closed the acquisition with Imeris, was to start looking for additional reserves around the mine site itself and have a bit of a hub and spoke model where, we would use the existing mine as the hub for processing the material, but we would look at different types of deposits that we could bank on for the future of the mine. And so we acquired a deposit in Mousseau, which is about 80 kilometers away. Mousseau, has a lot of potential for us, but at the same time, earlier this year, we started a drilling campaign within the site of Lac des Îles, which really hadn't happened before. And so, we have about 400 hectares there. Most of the east side of a property is the one that's been mined, but the west side of a property is actually never been mined before. So there's a lot of potential for us. And based on what we can see on the aerial survey, there's quite a few conductors. And so we're just completing now 8,000 meters of drilling there. And we should have results very soon. But we are quite hopeful that there is a lot more graphite to be mined within the mining lease itself.
Well, if any other graphite deposit is an indicator, it's usually they're very large deposits. There's other deposits usually found nearby. So I'm sure, I hope you have a bit of success there. You mentioned with the processing capacity, you mentioned, you said that's quite light. What's the current processing capacity? And you said that you got the licenses and the tailings that are already sort of there.
Sure.
So what's the current processing capacity, and how much, I guess, how much more can you actually put into the tailings before that's full as well?
Yeah, so the capacity of a plant today is 25,000 tons per year. We actually only produce about 12 to 13,000 tons at the moment, about 1,200 tons per month, basically. And that's because we're running 4.5 days a week. If we were running 7 days a week, we could do easily 25,000 tons. As I said, the tailing dam itself has decades of life left into it. So, the processing plant, of course, it's not new, but it has been quite well maintained, and there could be some upgrades to it in the years to come. And we could actually double the size of that processing plant because there's enough room for us to be able to run twice the amount of capacity that we have there. So, right now our strategy as a company is to identify more graphite deposits within the area on the mining lease, but also directly adjacent to it. There's quite a few properties directly adjacent to it. Then we have our property in Mousseau, which, looks very, very promising.
Do
And
you do you see Mosso as a backup option if you don't find the graphite closer to the mine, or is that always going to be sort of in your mind coming online no matter what you find close by?
Yeah, I think it's not a backup option for us. It's a really good deposit. It's large. It's more than 200,000 tons of graphite in that
Good.
deposit. So, for us, it's an asset that we will use at some point in the future. The question is, which one do we sequence first? We will sequence the one that's closest and cheapest first,
Yeah.
and but maybe one day we will have to use that one as well. And whether it's in 2 years or 6 years or 10 years, really depends upon what we find within the property itself.
And within the core deposit at the moment and sort of what you're expecting to be nearby, what's the current breakdown in terms of mesh sizes with the graphite that you have at the moment, and what's the overall basket price that you're obtaining?
Yeah, I mean, we sell the overall basket price for us is, and we publish that in our numbers. So it's a 1,500 US
Good.
dollars per ton.
Very good.
And we produce some very large flakes, what you would call jumbo,
Hmm.
and then we produce a nice variety of medium to large flakes. We produce some medium flakes, some fines, and some super fines, and it's pretty balanced. I would say that 40% of what we produce is fines, and 60% of what we produce would be medium to large, and jumbo flakes today.
And with the licenses around the current production facility that you haven't yet explored, would they encompass to be if you were to find graphite there and it's processable material that you wouldn't then have to get any additional permits that can just go straight in, or would you need to apply for more licenses for those areas?
No, no, no. That's within the license,
Oh, good.
that the mining lease that we have. Of course, we have to get some environmental permits and so on and so on. But we don't need another mining license because we currently have it's within the mining lease itself. So
Great.
for us, that would be the simplest option,
Yeah.
obviously. Now, if we were to go next door or in Mousseau, then we would have to apply for a mining license at that point.
Okay. Um, last question on this one because I do want to get on to the other assets
Sure.
as well. Um, what's the current sort of ASIC at the moment with sort of your 12,000, 13,000 production? What sort of guidance are you providing on that? And I guess what could it look like if it was at full scale, 25,000 potentially?
Yeah, I mean, I think today our average sales price is about $1,500 per pound. So if we're producing and selling 1,000 tons a month, we're generating about $1.5 million US dollars of income, or 2 million, and our profit margins today will generate about 10 million of EBITDA out of that. So
Wow,
they're
okay,
quite high.
very strong.
Of course, it will depend on the deposit that we find. It will depend on the strip ratio. It will depend upon what the flake distribution is going to look like. It will depend how we want to tune the plant and what kind of purity you want to get in order to affect the recovery of a site. But we've been doing this there for more than 35 years. So people who operate the site, they know how to handle this. So I'm not concerned at all.
Good.
But I think all of the projections that we make for the future is that graphite prices are only going to increase, not decrease, moving forward.
No, I agree
And
with that.
what is happening with the IRA is really differentiating the North American and European market from the Chinese market. And as I was saying earlier during our conversation, I think that today in China, it's very difficult to identify what the market price is for graphite because there are basically three companies that monopolize the entire volume of graphite that's being produced in China. And those companies are not making it public. In fact, they're probably quite integrated with these producers. So the whole cost of a graphite really doesn't appear to the outside world. It's within the battery price itself. But now that's changing because as you are having so many more producers that are making battery anode material, and those producers are most of them public companies that report their numbers, then you have a lot more transparency of what the graphite price looks like. And it's going to look a lot more like lithium in the future. I think lithium's pricing was a lot more transparent than graphite pricing because a lot of it was not traded in China. And so the rest of the world got to see exactly what was happening with lithium much earlier than they did for graphite. But a similar phenomenon, I believe, will happen with graphite. As the transparency happens and people will understand what the gap is between demand and supply, then suddenly, the pricing on the graphite will move forward. And this is why we're not in a hurry to sell the capacity we have today.
No, I do agree with that. I think the only thing with graphite is obviously, with say in comparison with lithium, is obviously you've got the carbonate and you've got hydroxide, and
Yeah.
you've got the two prices for that. I think the problem graphite has is it's very complicated to those not in the market in terms of the different mesh sizes, different prices, different purities. Even even just the percentage of total graphite content can have a huge influence on the price itself. And it's obviously you can benchmark that at say 95%, and then you can sort of do the different mesh size. But
Yeah, I think this is a good question. The way I look at it, and of course, I'm not the only guy in the world, obviously, but the way I look at it is, if you're making anode material from graphite, you have various steps in the production process. If you start from natural graphite, synthetic graphite is a little bit different, similar but a little bit different. In the natural graphite side, you want to start by having a particle that is between 7 and 25 micron. And the flake that comes out of the ground, even the fine, is between 30 and 40 microns. So no matter what particle you start with, you have to mill it down,
yeah,
right? So the mesh size actually really doesn't matter because it's not more expensive to mill a large flake versus a fine, right? And you still need to put them all in the mill. So today, the reason why people are using fines in the process is because it's the cheapest product. And therefore, why would they buy a large flake and turn it into a 7 to 25 micron product if they can use the fines to do that at a much cheaper price? You can buy fines today in the market for $800 a ton, right? You can buy large flakes in the market for $3,000 a ton. So just to give you how broad that is. Now, that's going to completely change because the moment there is no fines available, then people are going to put anything they can in the mill because anything will work in the mill,
agreed.
right?
What
So in the future, the fact that you have a large flake or a fine won't really matter for the battery industry. However, the users of graphite who use large flake and cannot use anything else, for example, the downstream applications we were talking before, like refractories or foils, or intercalated flakes or graphene type application, they don't have a choice. They need the large flake because they have to be able to produce their materials based on the processes they have today. And if they put a fine in the process, they're not going to be able to make a foil out of it. And this is exactly why we made the acquisition that we did, moving downstream with Neograph, who's been one of our customers for 30 years, is they really value the size of the large flakes because that's what they need in their process. And so I think what will happen actually in the future is the graphite will all go up because of a battery industry and there's
yeah,
going to be a shortage. But actually the large flakes will even become more valuable because anybody
well,
will
that's
be
interesting.
willing to put that into the mill. And those people who really want them, for example, a carbon black, which is a refractory application, they need medium to large flakes to do that. And if they can't get a hold of that material, that's 9% of their brick. It's probably the most value they have to offer to the marketplace. And therefore, if they want to be able to make carbon bricks and sell refractory materials in the steel industry, they're going to have to secure these large to medium flakes that they use in the brick
It's,
today.
I never looked at it like that because we have actually discussed on this channel before the idea of sort of as you start seeing these anode demand start becoming the majority of demand in the graphite space. Well, it's
Right.
not quite there yet, but it's estimated it will be either towards the end of this year or early next year.
Yeah, I estimate it's probably half a million today. So
Yeah.
it is probably 60 or 70% of the market today.
It is.
Yeah,
Okay, I missed that headline.
yeah,
But I guess one of the things that we have been, or what we have heard is that you will start seeing exactly what you were saying there in terms of people will start throwing their jumbos and their, maybe not jumbos,
yeah.
but their larger
Well,
flakes in.
jumbo would be a pity.
Yeah, that would be a pity.
I would cry.
But you will start see sort of further up from the fines, the higher mesh sizes actually being turned into fines to
Correct.
meet up with demand, and you will start seeing these sort of fines and small prices start increasing
Yep.
to incentivize that. But one of the things I never did put together, which you've just mentioned there, is that as people start doing that, the supply of the jumbo and the larges actually reduces, and therefore the price should therefore increase, which
Yeah,
is
it's going to
interesting.
become more rare, you know.
Yeah,
And in our plant, we do a special job to take care of these larger flakes because you can also design your flow sheet so that you don't really care about the large flakes and you only make flines. Now we design our flow sheet specifically to take care of these jumbo and large and medium flakes because the market wants them,
yeah.
needs them, and pays for them to,
Well, and it
you know.
increases your basket price as well, which
Absolutely.
makes you more profitable. Let's go on to Namibia, because this is an interesting one for me. Obviously, again, you've purchased it from Imerys, but this was a producing mine for a
Yeah.
while, right? But you've found a new greenfield site which looks very, very promising, and you're moving the production or the processing plant from the original site to where the new resource is. Um, quite a task. So maybe just run us through what the ideas
Sure.
are at the moment.
It's a little bit different than that.
Okay.
So, when we discovered this mine in 2016, as I was working for Imerys, we partnered with a gentleman who owned the mining license for the deposit. And the deposit is Okanjende. So it's south of Otjiwarongo, which is about 220 kilometers north of Windhoek, the capital, on the main road. And we wanted to develop this with limited capex. And in order to do that, he came up with an interesting idea, which was to buy, this was our partner in Namibia, was to buy an old fluorspar mine that belonged to Solvay. And Solvay had recently put that mine in care and maintenance, but it had all the infrastructure. It had the water, it had the electricity, the tailing dam, the road. And so for us, if you want, it was much cheaper to build a processing facility there. And that was 70 kilometers away from the mine site, which was Okanjande. This facility was called Okuruso. And basically what we did is we built the plant there on the back end of a flotation circuit that was being refurbished. So it was the old fluorspar flotation circuit. We refurbished that and we built a brand new back end on it. We used the power and the water that was already available and the tailing dam. And we started the plant very quickly. Within 8 months, we were in production. And we were trucking the ore from Okajande to Okuruso, and we were producing material. And in 2018, the market price really collapsed for graphite, and we just couldn't compete.
And that
And
was when
so,
Syra sort of overflooded.
sorry,
Was that when Syra sort of overflooded the market? Was that
it
right?
wasn't. It was just before Syra
Just
was there. It
before that.
was mostly the Chinese that were
Right.
basically selling, dumping material into Europe because they were shifting from natural to synthetic graphite in China.
Right.
So there was a lot of excess capacity of natural graphite at the
Just
time.
while I've got you here, actually, on
Sure,
synthetic, I mean, I was reading recently that it can cost up to about 3 times the price of natural graphite.
it's expensive.
Very expensive, and it's also a lot more, I guess, costly from a ESG perspective or an environmental perspective, being a byproduct of crude oil, obviously.
Yeah,
Um, d- I'll be talking to Wood Mackenzie soon, but and asking them the same question. But I mean, from your perspective, I mean, can anode manufacturers can they afford to keep using synthetic in the long term, do you think? Or what's your view on that?
Look, it really depends what they're trying to achieve because the materials behave quite differently in the battery itself. One has less capacity, one has more capacity. The other has longer cycling capability, if you want to really benefit from power, then you want to use a different type of mix between the two material. And so from a purely technical point of view, the best batteries actually use a mix of both
A
synthetic
blend,
and
yeah.
natural, and they blend
Yeah.
them together,
Yeah.
which is great. Nowadays, you see a lot of silicone being introduced into the battery. And so, I believe that the natural graphite is better suited for that. And so, there's a lot of questions about where is it going to go from a silicone perspective, and how high the percentages of silicone in the batteries are going to be, and what's the best solution to deal with that from a graphite perspective. But the other side of the coin with regards to graphite is really around the CO2 footprint.
Mm.
You know, to make synthetic graphite, and we at Imerys produce 20,000 tons of synthetic graphite out of our facility in Lugano on an annual basis. To make synthetic graphite, you have to start with a very high quality petroleum or pitch coke. And that material you have to heat at about 2,600 degrees, which is almost the temperature of the sun. And you have to do that for 48 hours
Wow.
if you
Yeah,
want to
so it's
transform
extremely energy intensive.
that material. So you can imagine, you're starting with a petroleum product at the beginning, and then you're putting, a huge amount of electricity into the material in order to get it to that temperature. And then you have to basically let it cool off, because when it's at 2,600 degrees, it takes almost 2 to 3 weeks to cool.
Yeah.
So you cannot touch it. You have to leave it there. And so, you're releasing all this CO2 and this heat that you're not using. And so when you make a calculation between how much CO2 are you actually consuming in order to produce natural graphite versus synthetic graphite? Very often it's a 5-to-1 ratio,
Yeah.
where the amount of CO2 emitted by the production of synthetic graphite is 5 times what you would do for a comparable natural graphite. So, and people are paying a lot more attention to that than they did in the past.
Well, understandably, because obviously this transition to EV is to be about being more environmentally friendly, right?
Sure,
And if the input into these batteries are worse,
sure.
then what are we doing it for?
Yeah, and I think, people say, well, synthetic graphite is more available than natural graphite. Well, not exactly, because, the type of raw material that you have to use in order to produce synthetic graphite is also in quite short supply. It's coke. It comes out of a refinery. As you use less and less petrol or produce less and less steel, because you're going towards aluminum or you're producing electric cars, that material is going to become scarcer and scarcer and
Yeah.
scarcer. And so, already today, people who are producing like Phillips 66, they produce most of the needle coke that's being used in making synthetic graphite today. They have limited capacity. And unless they are willing to build brand new needle cokers, around their refineries, it's going to be a bit of a problem to get a hold of the raw material as well. Now, the Chinese are starting to increase the capacity, but we're not helping the environment by doing that. We're much better off working on developing natural graphite resources.
Yeah, and I'd love to see obviously that build out sort of outside of China potentially and into well, places like Quebec,
Sure.
and
And Ontario
and Ontario,
and
and
Namibia,
maybe one day the UK. You never know. But
But
the,
coming back to Namibia,
yeah,
your question is, why are we moving the plant that we first built in Okoruso to Okangende? Well, first of all, it was working fine when we had it in Okoruso, but we were spending a lot of money on the trucking. The CO2 footprint was quite broad because we're driving the trucks up and down the road.
yep,
And, that mine is capable of producing a lot more than the 30,000 tons it's been designed for. We can produce probably as much as 150,000 tons on an annual basis. So by moving the site to the mine from the brownfield, which was the ex-Solvay mine, we can achieve all of that. We can reduce the CO2 footprint. We can take the cost down by not trucking the material, and we can have a much better base to expand from with already an existing tailing dam, existing water, existing power that is there. And so we can move a lot faster as the industry requires more material.
just on Namibia, just run us through what's in the ground at the moment, what the projected production rates are. I just mentioned them there, but just give us a bit of a recap as to what this is in terms of total graphite content, what you'll be producing,
Sure.
what sort of, if you've done any economics on it, what sort of cash we could be generated here.
Sure, sure. We think that first of all, the flake distribution is actually quite similar to the one that we have in like this year. Maybe a little less jumbo flakes, a little bit more fines
Okay.
and medium flakes, which is very good. The actual graphite itself is easier to purify than the one that we have in Lactazil because it doesn't have any calcium carbonate in it. And you know, it's quite rich in terms of a deposit. It's not as rich as the one we have in Lactazil, but it's pretty close. And so, you know, the plant that we've designed based on the equipment that we bought from Imerys is about 30,000, 32,000 tons per year of capacity. So if you sell that in the market for $1,500 a ton US, then you know you're generating about 45 million US dollars of revenue, and our gross margin is expected to be right around $750 a ton. You know, 50% gross margin on that. So it's a very interesting business that can generate between 15 to 20 million of EBITDA. And we have published a PA on operating the site where it was before. We're just about to publish an update which will include the move to the mine site itself. You know.
So this is obviously meant to go into production in 2024.
We intend to start it at the end of 2024.
Okay.
That's correct.
I guess from my perspective, is this being funded through existing cash flow from the Quebec projects, or do you need to finance again? And in terms of offtake, how does that work with the Namibia project? Because obviously it's a completely different continent. Do you need to go out and find new offtake partners, or do you already have existing offtake partners you can send this on
Yeah,
to?
good, all good questions. You know, I think we have, you know, we have, when we financed the business, you know, we worked a lot on royalty and streams. And for us, you know, it made a lot of sense, especially where interest rates are
Yeah, yeah,
today.
absolutely.
You know, it was actually quite a good choice. I signed 2020, but it was quite a good choice at the time. So, you know, we still have some headroom there that we can use. We have some cash flow that we are generating out of our Lactazil mine, which we are currently using to advance the project. But for sure, you know, we need to find some additional financing to finish the project. Not a huge amount, but we need to find, you know, a
What's
little
the
bit
what's the
more
capex for that
financing.
roughly? Did you outline that in the PA, or is that something that we expect to
Yeah, so
see?
you know, it will come out in the next few days, but it's between 30 and 35 million US dollar, you
Okay,
know,
so
to do
not
that
extraordinary,
project.
not
Yeah, we're not
extraordinary.
talking about
Yeah.
hundreds of millions
Okay.
of dollars, you know.
And would you
Um,
would you be able to gear some of that towards debt, do you think? Is that the plan to um instead of raising all of that through equity, which could be dilutive, I guess some of it could be debt or
Yeah, no, we are actually trying to do everything through debt-like instruments.
brilliant.
You know,
Okay.
we don't really want to dilute the company at the moment, especially where the share price is. We
Yeah, yeah.
think we are
I agree.
grossly undervalued.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're trying to figure out how to do that through debt-like instrument. And we're not really in a hurry,
Mm,
you know, because we are producing today. The demand still hasn't arrived, but it brings me to the point around our customers. So, you know, we service about 100 customers out of Like this Hill today. And most of those customers are global companies and they need materials on a global basis.
yeah.
So, you know, we're actively talking to them about what would they want to do if we had additional volumes in Namibia. And in particular, you know, since we are going to be a little bit more, let's say, cost effective in Namibia, we can supply Europe, which is difficult to do from Canada
Yeah.
today. So for us, the European market is quite interesting and we can offer, you know, long-term supply security, but the timing is quite important, right? Because if we wait a little bit, maybe we'll be in a better position
I
than
think
than if we
so
don't, you
because
know.
we like most analysts, if you look at most of their forecasts, you sort of start seeing this, like I was saying earlier, this gap at 2025 in terms of a supply and demand
Yeah.
deficit. So, and obviously you're coming online end of 2024, which probably is exactly when you want to be coming online with these type of projects.
Yeah, and I think, you know, whether it's 2024, 2025 is a decision we need to make based on the demand that's in the market.
Sure.
You know, I think, you know, the project will take 14 months from the time we push a button until we can be in production. So, we are not in a hurry, as
Yeah.
I said before. We want to find the right solution from a financing perspective. We want to have the right offtakes from the customers that we have, and we want to make sure that the solution that we are developing on the mine site is the right one for us. Not only for this project, but to be able to expand it in the future, because we can go from the 32,000 tons all the way up to 150, all right?
Is that 150 just from Namibia, or is that
Yes.
just from Namibia?
Yeah.
Okay. So
That's
what,
the potential of that deposit,
right. Because I think by 2026, so I saw on your presentation you were forecasting around
Yeah.
75,000 tons. How achievable do you think that is?
Oh,
Is
I
it,
think it's very achievable,
yeah.
because I think we can produce easily, 25,000 tons out of our plant in like this year without doing any investment. We could double that to 50,000 tons. We will have 32,000 tons out of our plant in Namibia. And that's before we expand that. And we could easily expand that by 50,000 tons and another 50,000 tons. So it really depends what the demand is going to be. People seem to be very focused around what the annual capacity is, but, we are more concerned about what the demand is going to
Yeah.
be, because we can ramp up the capacity, the processing capacity, we can ramp up. We know our deposits are of good quality and there's plenty of graphite there. But the question is, how quickly do you deploy your processing facility? Not only in the mining, but also in the BAM facility, right? Because people are not going to just going to want to buy the graphite. They're going to want to buy BAM too,
Well,
right?
let's move on to BAM.
Okay.
First of all, for those unaware of what BAM is, tell us that.
BAM is basically an acronym for battery anode material. So when you're making a lithium-ion battery, you cannot just take the flakes that come out of one of our facilities, for example, the one in Lac des and put it into the battery, because it won't have the right size, the right shape, the right purity, and the right coating. So basically what you have to do is you have to process that graphite and turn it into what people call BAM material, battery anode material. And to do that, as I said before, we have to mill the material, we have to shape it, then we have to purify it up to 99.9596, which is a free 9 purity level. Otherwise, it may create a problem in the battery in terms of short-circuiting the battery.
Mm.
And then you have to protect the graphite with a coating, which is usually a pitch material, which is graphitized. So, and in order to do that, you need a lot of power, you need a lot of room, you need a lot of people. And so we've been working for the last year to identify a location in Quebec, because we think that's the right location to consume a lot of energy right now,
Mhm.
because it's all hydro and it's all priced very competitively at 4 cents Canadian a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
So, it's really a no-brainer for us. And so we've been working with the authorities in Quebec to find the right place, and we just selected a piece of land in Baie-Comeau, which is very large, 1.2 million square meters.
Nice.
And we are going to start doing our feasibility study on this piece of land, and we're in the process of finalizing our needs in terms of power to agree with Hydro-Quebec in terms of how much power we actually need. And the thinking around that facility is we want to provide the infrastructure and the graphite material for companies that have expertise in producing anode material today, and to bring their technology and co-invest with us within the site itself. So we always talk about, we're going to have a large site. It's going to have all the infrastructure that one needs to produce anode material, but we'll have multiple partners with multiple technologies that will use our graphite as an input and produce anode material that's going to be sold. And logistically, Baie-Comeau is a fantastic place because it's on a deep water port. So we can come in and out of Baie-Comeau to Europe, or from Europe, directly without having to go to Montreal. So that makes a big difference. We have a train connection between our assets in Canada. So basically, we can bring the material by ship and by train to Baie-Comeau in large quantities, and we can re-export what we produce in Baie-Comeau to Europe and North America using either the train or the St. Lawrence Seaway, or by ship across to Europe or along the eastern seaboard of the United States, all the way down to Louisiana if we need be. So logistically, it's a really good place to be. And what we're thinking around our Baie-Comeau facility is that we will build it as a modular plant. So although we have that large piece of land that we
So
selected,
that's good
yeah.
because obviously you were talking about, I was reading that you had 200,000 tons per year. That potentially wouldn't, is that your starting
No,
amount,
no,
or
no,
so
no.
you'd actually build that up over
No,
time?
no. I mean, the thing is, if you want to be successful in the battery anode material, you got to be cost effective.
Well, this is what I was going to ask based on that was obviously where
Sure.
you're going to be finding the source material from.
Yeah,
But it's not, so what's the current plan or thinking at the moment in terms of how much modular, I guess in a modular fashion, what would you incrementally be increasing by?
sure,
And I just one more thing I wouldn't mind you
sure.
touching on in the answer is you were talking about this, you sort of need partners and they have the IP to make it a sphericalized sort of coated graphite project.
Yeah.
Are those partners already in place, or is that something that you need to work towards as
No,
well?
no, they're already in place, and
Good.
we're already doing trials, and we are testing materials as we speak. It's kind of interesting because to produce 200,000 tons of anode material, you need 300,000 tons of
Yeah.
graphite, and because the yield's about 65%. So if you take our three assets, Biscuit Creek, Lac des Îles, and Namibia, and you total up what the potential on an annual basis, it allows you to produce 200,000 ton of anode material.
Right.
And that's why we sized it to 200,000 tons, because we know we've got enough raw material to be able to get there.
So you could be your own offtake partner.
Correct.
Yeah.
But at the same time, um, we don't want to ramp those up too quickly because, if we have all this material and there's no customer, then we'll be in trouble.
Yeah.
So we have designed our mining growth strategy and our anode material strategy to be modular and in concert with each other. So, for example, in Namibia, we can grow by modules of 50,000 tons. We can double the capacity in Lac des Îles. We can do two modules of 40 to 50,000 tons each in Biscuit Creek. So if you add those, that will create enough capacity in order to feed the plant. And the anode material plant, usually those are 10,000 ton lines. So we can drop these lines as the market demands them.
Oh, good. Okay.
And so, for example, we could go to an OEM, GM, Ford, or the others, and we could say, if you want 20,000 tons per annum, we're going to build two lines for you, and we can dedicate those two lines for them. And one of them could be chemical purification, the other one could be thermal purification, because the properties of the material that comes out is different if you do one or the other. So we really want to be able to cater to the customer,
Good.
to guarantee the supply of the raw materials comes out outside of China. And we will process it in Quebec, where it's going to be the cheapest in the world, in a site that's going to give us the scale that we need, right? Because that's important to reduce the cost. And we will do it in a modular fashion so that as we get more and more customers, they will basically own lines of 10,000 tons.
What sort of value conversion will you be seeing from, rather than selling just your flake graphite, but instead selling this sphericalized graphite?
It's quite interesting, the prices that are being quoted today, not only from us, but from all the other companies that are planning to produce anode material from natural graphite in North America is between, ten to $12,000 per ton. And we currently sell our flakes for 1,500 as a basket, right? So you can imagine, it's a 10-time improvement in value. But of course, there's a lot of capital that has to go in the ground to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot
So
of, and also like you were saying, there's 65% of that actually gets converted as well, right?
exactly.
So there are some deductions there, but overall, there's huge value accretion, really.
Yeah, no, I think, it will create a lot of value, but it requires a lot of capex. And this is why, we are working with all the authorities in Canada and US to try to understand what kind of funding could be available for us to build this facility and to build our business moving forward. And, we cannot expect the investor to take 100% of the risk. I've said
No.
this before in a number of different interviews. I think that we need the support of the government in order for us to be able to execute on this plan. And I always say, from a capital structure point of view, we need to have 1/3 from government support, one third in debt, and one third in equity. And I think that works.
Yeah.
Around the amount of capital we have to deploy, the margin we make, um, and the timing around it, if we have that kind of capital structure, it works.
What's the timeline on this part of the business? Because obviously you've just got your planning for the actual site itself, but this obviously you've got what I love about this story so far anyway is that you've got so many milestones coming up over the next few years, especially with the increased capacity and other projects coming online. But I mean this unlocks a lot of value. Is this 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line? Is this what sort of
No, no, no. I think it's much quicker than that. If you look at the near-term catalyst for our business, so we really have to focus on more drilling in Lac des Îles, because
yes,
if we can find, another 2 million tons of ore there, it's a huge amount of value for
yeah.
shareholders. And so that must be the number one catalyst that we're working on. The second one is we need to restart, we need to move and restart Namibia, right? So that's our second catalyst. And then the third one is really to progress on our Baie-Comeau facilities. So, let's formalize the agreements with our partners. Let's do the due diligence on the site. Let's provide the market with more visibility as to what we need to do. And then the fourth one is let's go look for funding to do all this,
Yeah.
right? So let's keep on working with the governments. Let's keep on working with debt-like instrument to be able to develop our company, and let's go get some offtakes from customers,
Good.
and those are the four catalysts that I keep on following on my list every day. And along the side of that, we continue to invest downstream, because if we have a good opportunity like Neograph,
Well, I just wanted to touch
yeah,
on Neograph
yeah,
actually. Yeah,
sure,
it's a good thing to close on, I guess, is you've got a 33.3% equity, but 50.1 voting rights.
yeah.
Tell us about that for a start, but also just run us through Neograph and why you decided to invest in the company.
Yeah, let me start with the other side.
Yeah,
Why did we buy into Neograph? I mean, first of all, they're historically, they've been in the carbon powder business for 130 years. The old Union Carbide. There's a lot of history with that business. I've known these guys since 2013. They were sold in 2017 to a private equity fund. I wish Emirates would have bought them at the time, but we just couldn't, for a number of different reasons. And so when they were up for sale again in 2022, it was a great opportunity for us. And, we are very close to them. We were their supplier. And so, it made a lot of sense. And we want to own 100% of that company over time, but we have to prioritize our capital in the right areas. So what we did is we partnered with a private equity fund out of of Cleveland. And what they did is, they fronted the deal for us, and we came on the back end of it. And, we can buy into the company over time with the objective of actually
but what does
100%
that
owning it.
unlock for you in terms of access to this company? And say you do eventually, there is a pathway to 100% ownership. What what does that specifically do for your company in the long? What can you do with that?
Well, technology, they have over 100 patents.
Hmm.
They have a fantastic lab. You know, what I really like about it is that it gets into space like, for example, fuel cell, which is also a very high growth rate, electronics industry, because they supply a lot of the foils to the Samsung and the Apples of this world in order to manage the heat inside their devices, be it a TV, a cell phone, a laptop, but they also have a lot of very interesting application around fire retardancy, around lithium-ion batteries, management of the heat of the lithium-ion batteries. So there's synergies with customers and applications. And then they have also a lot of very cool applications that are being developed around construction material, building materials. And when you think about the yield of our material to make anode material being 65%, what do you do with a 35%? You know? And I think they have a lot of great ideas of what to do with that 35%. And so for me, they're an ideal partner for us, because together we can develop applications for that material that will come out of the battery anode material plant, and today would be sold as a carbon razor, in the steel industry. We could actually create more value for that material and create more value for our shareholders by working with them to develop downstream applications.
Okay, good. So and it also sounds obviously with the retardant side of things as well. You can there's also a pathway for you there to sell your jumbo, and sort of have that pathway to that
Oh, for
market.
sure.
And then,
They love for us to be their owners because, we can supply them the material they need and we
yeah,
can secure that for sure. But, they don't consume a huge amount of flakes. Um, Today, they buy a few thousand tons a year from us compared to the lithium-ion battery world.
yeah,
It's very small, right?
yeah,
But on the other hand, the applications they're working on, which I think are very promising, can use the material that comes out of the BAM plant. And if you're producing 200,000 tons of BAM material, you have 100,000 tons of material coming out of
yeah.
that plant that really doesn't have an application today. So we got to, in order for us to make that viable, we've got to be developing application for the 100,000 ton of material that comes out of the BAM plant and is not being used in the battery.
Well,
And
that's a
so if you could put that in cement, for example, or if you could put that in plastics, or you could put that into, a lot of different applications, then you create a lot more value for your shareholders.
yeah. You're essentially creating a way to monetize waste material,
Correct.
which is brilliant. I guess just to close this off, I mean, I wouldn't mind, in your view, where do you see this company in 1 year's time and then 5 years' time?
Oh, we've been working very hard for the last year. I think in 1 year time, we will have found a lot more graphite in Lac des. We will have advanced our Namibian project significantly, be ready to start that up. We would have firmed up all our agreements and made huge progress on Baie-Comeau. And I think we would have more clarity as to what the government and the banks and the customers are willing to do to help us build this company. I think if we look 3 or 4 years down the road, we'll be one of the largest suppliers of carbon materials into the industry, both battery and non-battery. And I think, we'll be definitely, if not the largest outside of China.
Good. Ugh, thank you for your time.
Thank you.